Good afternoon or good evening, everybody, depending upon where you are logging in from. My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm the co-founder of the Parent Venture, a nonprofit organization that brings you the Parent Education Series, now in its 16th season. We are so glad to be with you tonight, and we feel so fortunate to have with us Madeleine Pisey from Mission B, a nonprofit that offers mindfulness education nationwide to students and educators. So again, we are so pleased that you're here with us for this self-care hour. The response has been huge with more than 200 registrants. We could not be more thrilled. Again, a special thank you to Corinne Winter, founder of Mission B. So we're glad to have you all with us here today. Let me just tell you a little bit about how the program is going to work. If you would like to hear Spanish, we have with us interpreter Cynthia Hinestrosa. You can click on chat and that will tell you how to use the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. You'll click on the globe icon, Globo, and then Español, and you will hear interpretation live in Spanish. Thank you, Cynthia. So again, we would like to say our thank yous today to lots of people: the Sequoia High School Education Foundation, Sequoia High School, Woodside High School, the Sequoia Union High School District, Sequoia Healthcare District, and the partner, the Parent Venture, our nonprofit organization. We will have about 45 minutes of mindfulness workshop time with Madeleine, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. This is a webinar format, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We have both a chat button where you can put in comments. Madeleine will be asking you for some of your comments today. My partner, Bev Hartman, will be putting in relevant links. And then there's also a Q&A button. So if you have questions either during the event or at the end of the event, please put your questions in the Q&A and your comments in the chat. Also at the end, we will be posting a link to a survey. It's very brief, I promise you, like 1 minute. Your comments, we read them all, and it really helps us with future planning and also to let our funders know how we're doing. So we hope you'll take a minute to fill out that survey. The video today will be available shortly on our video library, which has become a very popular and trusted resource. We've had more than 24,000 views on the video library, and it includes a lot of very interesting and important videos, so check that out. That link will also be coming in the chat later in the program today. Our next event is on Tuesday, September 14th, an important event, especially for those of you in California. Disaster Preparedness, Fire Safety and Prevention, a town hall hosted by Sequoia Healthcare District. Again, that's Tuesday, September 14th at 6 p.m. So let's get started. Let me tell you a little bit today about our featured presenter. Madeleine Pisey, Senior Mindful Educator and West Coast Director for nonprofit Mission B, is a meditation and yoga teacher and mindfulness consultant. Her ultimate goal in life is to help people have more clarity, and her deepest desire is to truly help others find ways and tools to make a significant impact on their self-acceptance and find freedom within this busy world in which we live. Madeleine's passion for self-study has taken her to Southeast Asia and India. Alongside her training, she completed her master's degree in mindfulness at Lesley University in 2020, where she embarked on silent retreats to significantly deepen her meditation and mindfulness practice. She is now in a 2-year mindfulness training through UC Berkeley. Sounds True with Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield. I hope I said that right, Madeleine. Please join me in a really warm welcome for Madeleine Pisey. Take it away, Madeleine.
Hey, thank you. So welcome to today's session. As you start to come into the session, I invite you to share in the chat box your name, what school and grade your child is in, and if you have ever tried mindfulness before. And so today's session, we will discuss how we can reduce COVID stress and anxiety through mindfulness and self-compassion. We're going to learn how to integrate self-care into our day and even our work day. Mindfulness, it supports the development of our self-awareness, which is really the first step of dealing with stress. And when we can start to strengthen this internal capacity, when we can discern how we are experiencing and relating to our life and our families and our work and even our relationships, we then have this knowledge on how we can better manage our energy and acknowledge when we need a little rest. So then we can build capacity to really be present with our family, even during challenging times. And if we don't check in with ourselves, we can become burnt out. And the World Health Organization actually characterized burnout as a medical condition. So with a strong mindfulness practice, we can check in with ourselves at any moment and see how we can reduce some stress. And so I invite you to start to ask yourself, like, how do you feel in this moment? Is your body feeling tense, or is it relaxed? Is your breath short? Are you holding your breath? And, research shows that taking just 2 minutes to notice our body and our breath can start to stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest, so you can recover and be in this world from a more relaxed state, which we'll talk about today. So today we're really going to explore this buzzword of mindfulness that we're now seeing all over, right? At the Whole Foods checkout lines, and NFL football teams are doing it, like the Eagles, and education systems, right? And businesses are also incorporating it into their day. So today's agenda will include doing some mindfulness and breath movement practices, learning about mindfulness and stress in our brains and our bodies, and also learn about self-compassion and how we can bring this practice into our day. And so this is a time for you to kind of take a step back and to relax. Getting more into that present moment. There's nothing you have to do. You don't have to do anything for anyone else. This is really just for you, a gift for you. And I just want to tell you a little bit more about who I am. As Charlene mentioned, my name is Madeleine, and I'm a senior mindfulness educator, and I also am the West Coast director for Mission B. And I found mindfulness when I was in high school. I was really anxious and overwhelmed, and I found myself being a perfectionist sometime. And I found my way into a yoga class, and that was my introduction into mindfulness. And after that, I was pretty hooked. I felt the benefits of my mind finally feeling calm, not hearing that self-critic as harshly telling me I needed to do more or that I wasn't good enough. And so these types of practices that we'll learn today have supported me immensely in my mental and my physical health. And that's why I'm here to serve you and to support you, because I truly, truly believe in these practices. And as Charlene mentioned, Mission B is a nonprofit, and we go into schools and we teach the children and even get to train the staff on how to bring this beautiful practice into the classroom. And as you can see, we've taught over 110 schools and trained over 7,000 teachers, and we've also worked all around the world. And so with that being said, let's start with doing a breath practice together. And so I'm going to teach you 3 different breath practices. And these are really great practices that you can do at any time of the day. You could do it first thing in the morning or before a really challenging conversation. That's my favorite time to do one, so I don't react. Or when you're waiting to pick up maybe your child from school and you're just sitting in your car, right? That's a really good time to do it too. And what's great about these practices is you can do it in a really short time, like a minute, or if you have more time, you can extend it to 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. And today you can kind of think of this, and I say this often, it's kind of like your mindfulness buffet, right? Some practices might not work for you, some might. I'm giving you a handful of practices because everyone likes different ones, right? So if you like a practice, I highly suggest to remember it, to take it in, and to start to do that practice daily. And so let's begin together. And so for the first one, for the take 5, it's a really simple practice. You're just going to lift up your right hand and you're going to look at your right hand, right? And before we start to do the breath practice, just bring your awareness to your hand. And I'll actually spotlight my video. And so just take a moment, look at your hand, kind of notice how it feels, the texture of it, the colors you see. And then just taking a big breath in and a big breath out. And then you're going to start to trace your hand with your breath. So as you breathe in, you're going to draw your pointer finger up your pinky. And then as you breathe out, you're going to draw the finger down. And just doing that, breathing in and breathing out. Good. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. Really good. A really simple practice. You can just do it while you're sitting. Maybe you take a bus somewhere, you're in transportation. You can just look down at your hand and do this practice, and no one even has to know you're doing it. And then for the next one, I'm just going to take you from one practice to the next. So the first one is counting our breath. So we're going to inhale for a count of 7, and then we're going to hold our breath for a count of 2, and then we're going to exhale for a count of 8. And then after that, I'm going to take you through a very short modified body scan, which is just you noticing various parts of your body. And I'm going to cue you through all that. So when you're ready, you can find a comfortable posture for you. You don't have to be seated. You can do this standing if you want. If you want to lie down, you're more than welcome to lie down, whatever suits you today. And you can bring your hands into your lap if you're seated. I invite you to close your eyes if that feels okay, just an option, or you can bring your gaze down towards something that's not going to distract you, like the floor or your hands. And just take a moment to allow the body to settle, relax your shoulders, feel your feet on the floor, and then take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And then you're going to count your breaths. You're going to inhale for a count of 7. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Hold your breath for 1, 2, and then exhale for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now do that on your own pace. Inhale for 7. Hold for 2. And exhale for 8. Inhale for 7. Hold for 2. And exhale for 8. Good. And then letting go of the counting, taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Then entering into the body scan. And so I invite you to just bring your awareness to your forehead. And maybe you notice some sensation in your forehead, like a tightness or a little pulsing. Or maybe you notice nothing, and that's also normal. And then bring your awareness to all the muscles around your eyes that take in information all day. And see if you can soften that area. And bringing your awareness to your jaw. And we tend to hold a lot of tension and stress in our jaw. So maybe moving the lower jaw a little side to side to release any unneeded stress in that area. Good. And then taking a deep breath in and a long breath out. And then slowly bringing your awareness back to the screen and opening your eyes at your own pace. And I would love to hear from you in the chat, what practices, did any of those breath practices feel good? Do you feel a sense of calmness? Did you notice anything from them? And feel free to just share how that experience was for you. Great. Yeah, grounding. Oops. And so now we're going to move into some movement practices because everyone says that they don't have time to stretch or do yoga, but we can really do these movements in just a few moments, right? Just like the breath. You can do it for a short time or you can extend it for a long time. And so for the first practice, it's called the self-compassion movement because today we're talking a lot about self-compassion. And so for this movement, I invite you to take your pointer finger and your middle finger, and you can close your eyes and just start to make some movements here, right? doing some little circles around the cheekbones and your jaw, and seeing if you can slow down the breath as you do this. Just kind of moving around your face wherever you feel some tension. And even moving up into the forehead area. A lot of people also hold stress in this part of their face. So just kind of releasing that. Good. And then even the earlobes, sort of pinching the earlobes, massaging them. And then even the scalp area, just sort of massaging, doing little circles in this area as well. And even the neck, giving yourself a little self-massage around the neck and the shoulders. Great. And then for the next movement, it's called the falling stretch. And you're welcome to do this seated, or you can do this standing. And unfortunately, you can't see my legs, but I invite you to extend your legs long so that your heels are touching the floor. Or if you're standing up, just standing up with your feet about hip distance apart. And then inhale, reach your arms up high, grow really tall. And then as you breathe out, you're just going to fold forward over your legs and draw your chin slightly in toward your chest. And just stay there for a breath. And a breath out. Good. And then do that one more time. Inhale, grow tall. And then exhale, fold again. Staying here for 2 breaths, allowing the head to get heavy, the shoulders to get soft. Breathing in and breathing out. Great. And then coming back to the screen. And so those are just 2 short movements that you can do. You can add to your practices for self-care and just start to add that into your day. And so let's connect with one another. Feel free to share in the chat what's one thing you do to help you relax. And for me, the other day, I was feeling pretty stressed. I had my plate full of tasks to get done, so I paused and I spent just 5 minutes making a warm cup of tea and sitting outside on my patio without my phone. And that actually really helped me. And once you write your response, I invite you to also read over what others write for what they do to relax. And you may be inspired by what someone does, or maybe you find a commonality as well. And so what is mindfulness? So like, how often have you been driving home from the grocery store and you made it home safely, but you don't remember anything about the drive, right? Or you're talking to a friend at lunch and you're thinking about your endless to-do list and have no idea what they just said. And I'm guilty of this happening, but with this practice of mindfulness, I now have that awareness that this is happening, and I can bring my attention back to what is present, and I can be kind to myself instead of beating myself up about not focusing on what's right in front of me if it's that person, right? And mindfulness is that state of mind defined by having an awareness and an attitude, which is really important, the attitude in the present moment that's curious and it's accepting and it's non-judgmental. And so just to tell you a little bit more about Mission B, so we teach students obviously how to be more mindful, and an undergraduate student at Stanford University conducted her senior honors thesis on Mission B's program, and she surveyed the students before and after the program to assess their self-reported emotional state. And you can see her findings before the program that are listed here. 16 said they were angry, 12 said that they were stressed, 4 said they were sad. And then after the program, it showed that a consistent mindfulness practice, a daily practice that you start to do consistently, does have positive effects. 21 calmer, 8 happier, 7 better. And so this practice really does work, but you do have to be consistent with it. And so I invite you to take a moment and just for yourself, you don't need to write it in the chat, just for you, to take a moment and just ask yourself, what is your level of stress, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no stress at all, and 10 being highly stressed. How do you feel today? What is your stress level? And so I really want to normalize that parents and caregivers and adults and just being a human being is really, really stressful, especially during this time of COVID, right? And the Gallup poll in 2003 stated that 74% of adults are stressed about work, and 1 in 3 adults do not get enough sleep. And even a more recent study that was conducted online within the US by the Harris poll reported that nearly half of parents, 48%, said that the level of stress in their life has increased compared to before the COVID pandemic. So again, if you're feeling stressed, you're really not alone. And common humanity is a piece of mindfulness that a lot of people are struggling right now, right? Difficult times are always isolating, and that whatever challenge you're going through or feeling, to know again that you're not alone. And that so many of us, and I like to tell the students this too, though our social media may not show it, are having a hard time. We're all sort of figuring out new territory that's completely new to us, these new obstacles. And so what I want you to know and remember, and that's why I'm really here, is to remind you that we always have a choice to create a kinder inner landscape and inner mind, even when the outside world seems a little chaotic, right? So that's why this practice is so essential, so that we can start to gain back some control, create those healthy self-care routines, and find ways to be present with our families and in our lives and be less stressed. And so I invite you to take another pause and share in the chat this time to think about one thing that is causing you stress. You know, is it relationships, or is it work? Is it your children? You know, for me personally, lately it's been that work-life balance. You know, the world opening back up, I want to see people more, but I also got really comfortable with slowing down and taking time for myself. So I'm trying to figure out that balance. So feel free to share in the chat, what's that one thing that's causing you stress? And then again, to read over what other people are saying to see if you have that commonality. And so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the science to help you understand what's happening to our minds and our bodies when we're under stress, and why mindfulness is really, really important for our well-being. And so just to tell you a little bit about our brain, this is our brain, right? And when we are under stress, what happens is our amygdala gets activated, right? And the amygdala is that little circle that you see in the center of our brain. It's our alarm system, right? And when something is happening, we see it as threatening. It is actually blocked by the amygdala, either having us, as you probably have heard of, fight, flight, or freeze. Like freezing when we have to speak to an audience, or if we're afraid and we want to leave a situation. And so the amygdala does not see the difference between perceived threat and actual danger. And for fight or flight, you can imagine, and we've evolved this way over thousands of years, right? Imagine we were back in the cave days and we were sitting around a campfire and we heard like a stick snap in the woods. What happens to us? Instantly, our bodies are alert, our stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood our body so we can fight or we can run, whatever we need to do to survive. And that's really great if there's actually a tiger coming after us, right? Or it can also be helpful today if we're trying to cross the street and a bus or a car comes around the corner and we need to back up. But if we get triggered, like we do in our daily lives, we have the same response as we do when we get an angry email from a customer, or if we get alerted constantly by our news apps, or don't receive a text back soon enough from someone. Our bodies get triggered, that same stress response, same chemicals are flooding our bodies. And when they stay in our bodies too long, it doesn't have great health implications, right? We can lose memory or have heart disease, all those bad things. And it often triggers false alarms and brings us about, reactive behaviors, like having to public speak can make us feel not good, like physically sick. It can even scare us, even though it's not a life-threatening activity. And I remember so clearly in high school how much I hated like raising my hand or being called on in class. I was really shy. And the teacher would call on me and I felt my face getting red. I felt my palms sweating, even though I knew I had the answer. And that's because my amygdala was being activated. And when that happens, we begin to disconnect right from our rational thinking, which is the prefrontal cortex, that wise part of our brain that allows us to make decisions. And even though I knew I had the answers, my brain was telling me I was in danger and I needed to flee. So the amygdala can also hinder access to our memory, which is the hippocampus that you can see on there, that squiggly line. So once I started to practice mindfulness, I began to be able to speak up in class, and I loved it because I finally was able to share some insight, and it was really good for me. And mindfulness calms the amygdala, reconnects us to our prefrontal cortex, and it regains us access to, our executive functions, to pay attention and to regulate our emotions and to even access empathy when we're under stress. And what's really fascinating is even a study at Harvard found that beginners who meditated for just 8 weeks grew the gray matter in the areas of their brain associated with self-awareness and even compassion. Meanwhile, the areas of their brain associated with stress, the amygdala, shrank. So with a consistent practice, this actually works. And so you can see a bit more of what's happening to our bodies here when we're under stress. So we have 2 nervous systems, right? And when one is on, the other one is off. So we have the fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic. And we always teach children sympathetic, stressful nervous system. And the other one is rest and digest, parasympathetic, peaceful nervous system. And so when I used to public speak, like raise my hand in class, right, my heartbeat would accelerate, my stomach would get upset, I'd get sweaty palms. But once I began to have a daily practice, I was able to find ways to access my peaceful nervous system in stressful situations. And so it did the opposite. Everything moves slowly. And what it does is it flushes those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline from our bodies. It moves blood and oxygen to our rest and digest. And so you might think about those things that you do to relieve stress, right? That we shared in the chat that help you relax, like hobbies and hiking or going for a walk. And all of us have these strategies to deal with stress, but we don't always have time in the moment to do our activity to take care of our stress. And if we get a rush of stress right before a meeting, we don't always have time to go call a friend or go out for a walk. But what we can do is we can breathe, right? We can take a deep breath in and we can take a deep breath out. And it all really begins with just being aware, that mindfulness, that self-awareness. Start with that own awareness of our bodies, right? Like, oh, wow, I'm feeling a little stressed right now. And no matter what I'm doing, I can choose to take some deep breaths to release stress and take back that control. And the other day I received like a handful of emails and I felt again that heartbeat racing, palms sweating, whatever it was. So I chose to take some deep breaths and ask myself what I needed in that moment. And I did a little body scan, relaxed my body, and I felt a lot better. And a lot of these mindfulness techniques start with the breath, and that's because the breath really does allow the body to settle. It activates that parasympathetic nervous system. So always remember that you always have that choice to take some breaths. And so taking that pause is also a benefit from mindfulness. It gives us space to respond rationally. How often have you reacted at someone and quickly regretted it? Like you opened your mouth and you said something and you're like, oh, that was not the nicest thing to say. We're all guilty of that. We're humans, right? But this practice does help us strengthen that internal pause button. And with a mindfulness practice, we can teach ourselves to take a pause before reacting and allow the prefrontal cortex to really analyze the information instead of that immediate impulse. It really gives us a choice. And so you can see here, like, we always have the stimulus, right? We always have the stressor, but with a mindfulness practice, we have that self-regulation technique. We have those tools to pause in the moment and then to respond. And so I invite you to take another pause and to reflect just for yourself. If you have a pen and paper, feel free to jot it down. But what in the past has worked for you to get you out of that fight, flight, or freeze and into, a more rest and digest state? Maybe you called a friend and heard some kind and supportive words and were reminded you're not alone, right? Or maybe you took time to get outside and go for a walk. Like I mentioned the other day when I was on my email, I felt myself getting into that fight or flight state. And I decided to take a pause for myself, take some deep breaths, and to actually step away from it for a moment. And then I felt my parasympathetic nervous system coming in by connecting to nature and taking a deep breath and feeling the fresh air. And so just to remind you, mindfulness is there for you. It's a really simple practice. The hardest part of it is to remember to do it. And in mindfulness, we use the phrase putting on our oxygen mask first. And on airlines, the flight attendants tell us to put on your oxygen mask before you can help someone else, right? And that's because we need to, obviously in those situations, we need to be able to breathe so then we can help someone else. And that's the same here with self-care. We need to have practices that we do for ourselves so then we can be fully present and supportive of others and our families and our kids or whoever it is. And if we don't take care of ourselves, we're going to get burnt out or worn out, or we're going to be reactive. And we need to tend to ourselves, especially more now with everything happening. And so maybe again, just checking in with yourself in this moment. How is your body? What do you notice? Can you release your shoulders a little bit? Can you relax your jaw? Maybe take some deep breaths. And so, speaking of putting ourselves first, Brene Brown wrote this beautiful parenting manifesto in her book, Daring Greatly. And I highly recommend reading it if you haven't read it before. And I actually added it to your handout, the manifesto at the end. And so she is a research professor at the University of Houston and an author of, I think, 4 or 5 New York Times bestsellers. And so she wrote this manifesto for herself as a daily reminder, or like a little meditation, when she found herself in that fear mindset of never being enough as a parent, right? It reminded her to let go of any judgment or any self-doubt when it came to raising her kids and when she made a mistake. And she wrote, who we are and how we engage with the world are much stronger predictors of how our children will do than what we know about parenting. And so it's so important that we have boundaries that allow us space to take care of ourselves so then we are fully present to those around us and we're less reactive. I know it's way easier said than done to create boundaries as a caregiver, because when we set boundaries, that means we don't necessarily have things in our control, right? And our homes may not be as orderly as we wish them to be, or we might feel like we're letting someone down. But for me, I know I'm not a parent yet, but I also struggle to put myself first sometimes, right? I have a highly energetic dog, making sure my house is clean. I work a few jobs, I'm studying in school. And I found it was really, really helpful to create non-negotiables with myself of practices I need daily to stay grounded so that I can be really kind to those around me and in my home. And so I have to take 15 minutes of quietness a day, which range from a walking meditation or a sitting practice or a movement practice. And another example was there ever a day you were scheduled to, right, go to a workout class or go for a run or Pilates, whatever it is, and then something comes up and your child needs you, and the next thing you know, it's like 7 p.m. and you have to make dinner and then clean up the house. And Brene Brown is expressing how we need to be able to put ourselves first in certain moments, even if it's just 5 minutes. So then we are more fully there for our families and we're not resentful. So that may mean not doing the laundry and allowing it to sit there for a moment as you go take an hour for yourself to move or stretch or breathe, whatever you need. And you can read on the screen right here one of her quotes from her manifesto. We will teach you compassion by practicing compassion with ourselves first, then with each other. We will set and respect boundaries. We will honor hard work, hope, and persevere. Rest and play will be family values as well as family practices. So, with that being said, Brene Brown really believes that we need to strengthen our self-compassion and start to let go of that judgment. And I have some practices for you to help you with that. But first, just to remind us of what is compassion, right? We can think of an example like maybe you have a really good friend who's going through a hard time, like maybe a divorce or got laid off from a job. And for us to really find compassion, we have to tune into our friend's suffering, right? Notice the way they look, their energy. We notice that they are in pain and we choose to be kind and supportive, right? We want him or her to know that we care. And it's important to also know that, suffering is part of the human experience. We all experience it in some way. And so compassion is really just noticing the suffering, being caring to the suffering, and remembering that it's part of being a human being. And that's the same for self-compassion, right? But the big step is to notice your own pain first. And a lot of times it actually comes from self-criticism or judgment. Like when we make a mistake for saying something. Like the other day, I sent out an email blast and I accidentally made a typo on the email. And I initially was not very nice to myself. And a lot of times we don't chime in that self-compassion, but luckily I have this practice. So in that moment, I was really able to change that narrative. I acknowledged something went wrong. I said, hey, this isn't supposed to happen, but it did. And I learned a lesson from it. And the best part of self-compassion is we're always here to give it to ourselves, right? We're always with ourselves. And we need self-compassion, right? And empathy, so that we can have it for other people, to really have compassion for others, especially our family. And so self-compassion gives us a daily reminder that we're human. A lot of people, when they notice something they don't like about themselves, they think they're the only ones, right? Why aren't things not going perfectly for me? With feelings of, this shouldn't be happening, or it usually allows us to feel cut off or separate, right? And common humanity helps us realize we're all in this together. And just for another example, the other day, I caught myself in a self-critic. And as Charlene mentioned, I'm also a yoga teacher, and I taught a yoga class the other day, and I totally forgot a pose on one side. And I had all the thoughts of, you're not good enough. How could you have forgotten that? I can't believe you messed up, blah, 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 blah. We're going off. So then I realized I had the self-critic, right? And when I forgot that yoga pose, and I was able to find that common humanity, I said to myself, we all make mistakes. We're not meant to be perfect. It's okay. I'm a human being. And it helped me to not feel alone in it. And it's the same with parenting, right? Maybe you forgot to attend a parent night or a sporting event, right? We can remember that we're not alone in this, and that someone else has probably done the same thing, and that we're all doing the best that we can. And it also gives us, that self-kindness, right? We learn how to start to speak kinder to ourselves. We begin to start to speak to ourselves like we speak to our good friend or your child, or even a younger version of yourselves when you're going through a hard time. Because when things go wrong, we're usually harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And we often don't even notice that we're saying it, like you're not good enough or whatever it is. And so self-kindness allows us to actively stop and confront, and to start to comfort ourselves in those moments. So in that instance with the silly yoga pose, right, I was able to take a pause and to actually speak to myself like, Madeleine, it's okay, you made a mistake. And I was able to support myself in that moment. And so we can see here, we can start to notice our unhelpful thoughts and that self-critic and begin to change the dialogue. And like I mentioned, for the self-compassion thought, sometimes it's hard to just speak it to yourself. So again, it could be really helpful to think of someone you love and you trust and them saying it to you. Or you could think of it as like your inner coach saying it to you, or saying it to a younger version of yourself to get that support. And just here are some examples, like you can see, like a lack of self-care. I'm tired every day. That's not very supportive to say to yourself. It's pretty judgmental, right? Instead, you say, I go to bed early. You take that steps for self-care. The other night, I reacted at my partner for not doing the dishes. And the unhelpful thoughts that were going off in my head were like, wow, you're not a nice person. You're so unmindful. You're reacting. So then I changed it. I took a deep breath and said to myself, it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay that I reacted. I'm learning. And then I apologized to my partner. And then I also apologized to myself, right? And so I invite you to take another pause and just think of a moment you had an unhelpful thought and how you can change it to a more helpful, self-compassionate thought. And so here is a super short practice to do in any moment. And I'm going to explain it, and then I'm going to take you through a guided practice through this that might be a little bit longer than if you wanted to do it on your own. So the first step is to take a pause and to notice that the judgment is there or the suffering is there, right? To take a few deep breaths and be like, oh, wow, I feel overwhelmed. I'm feeling critical of myself. I'm feeling frustrated, whatever it is. And then the next step is to bring in the mindfulness, right? And to be with it without the judgment and the curiosity, like what's happening in my body right now? What am I saying to myself? What's going on in my mind? What emotions are present? And then lastly, what do you need to hear? Being your best coach for yourself, being your best friend, right? What do you need to hear? Or what do you need for yourself? And so I invite you now we're going to drop into a practice together. So I invite you to find that comfortable position for you. You're welcome again to find a seat or to lie down, whatever works best for you. And before we begin, I actually invite you to think of a recent time you made a mistake. And on a scale of 1 to 10, having it be a 5 or less. So it could be a similar mistake that I've made, maybe a mistake at work, or you said something unkind. And so just bring that to mind. And you can close the eyes or bring the gaze downward. And just start by taking a few deep breaths, breathing in and breathing out. And just really being present, with this challenge, this mistake that you made, and doing a little investigation and just start to notice how it's making you feel. Is it making you feel inadequate? Has it caused some self-criticism? Just really getting in touch with your feelings about it. Does it make you feel sad? And then asking how it feels in your body. Is there like a tightness in the chest or heaviness in the heart? Maybe tension in the shoulders. And maybe there's something around, not being good enough. And some of our greatest pain is caused, at our own hands, because we think we need to be perfect, even though we're all human. And I invite you to, if it feels okay for you, to maybe bring a hand to your heart or a hand on your shoulder for some support, or you can even interlace your hands on your lower rib cage. And just taking some deep breaths down into the belly. And this could be a really good way to help release any tension. And just know that whatever self-critical thought you're having from the situation is completely normal. It's really a common habit in our culture to beat ourselves up and to believe that we're not good enough. And to just know that you're feeling the same way someone else has probably felt before. And when someone else makes a mistake, you don't shame them, right? Instead, you can relate to their mistake and know that we all make mistakes. It's part of being human. And I now invite you to just say some kind phrases to yourself. And so bringing in that good friend, maybe an older you speaking to a younger you, or a mentor, or your inner coach. Feeling that physical support with the hand on the shoulder or the heart. And just in your mind, repeating the phrases, may I be kind to myself. And may I accept myself as I am. And if there's other phrases that seem more relevant to you, feel free to use them. And just slowly repeat the phrases to yourself. May I be kind to myself. May I accept myself as I am. And now I invite you to send these phrases out to all beings in the world. May we all be kind to ourselves. May we all accept ourselves as who we are. Good. And then taking a deep breath in. And a long breath out. Great. And then at your own time, you can slowly open up your eyes and come back to the screen. And I invite you to feel free to share in the chat how that practice felt for you. If maybe you felt a sense of kindness or connection or a release, whatever it was for you. And affirmations are positive statements that we say to ourselves daily that can help strengthen our self-compassion. And I always invite the students to write these down on like a piece of paper and put them in places they will see and remind them of their good nature. So you could also do this and put this on your fridge or your desk or on your computer or your phone screen, or do it as a family and come up with affirmations together. That's really healthy mirroring, right? To have these in places your child can see. And just asking yourself for a moment, what would you like to hear from a good friend, right? Or from someone you trust in moments of judgment or lack of self-care or suffering? And for me, I am strong, I am enough, I am healthy are really good ones. And so all you have to do with that, again, if it feels comfortable, bring a hand to your heart or a hand on your shoulder and just taking a moment for yourself and just saying, you know, in your mind, as you breathe in, I am strong. And then taking a breath out, or I am healthy and taking a breath out. And it's that simple, but just the hardest part about mindfulness, right, is remembering to do it. So that's why it's really good to have those reminders around your place so that you can remember and then start to bring that into your family too. And so a tip for self-compassion, right? So now we learned practices and how to do it, but how do we actually do it daily, right? Because like I said, it's the hardest thing is to remember to do it. And so I think the best thing to do is to add it onto an activity you already do. All of you are very busy caregivers and you don't need more to add to your plate. So I invite you to think of like 4 things you do daily. You brush your teeth twice a day, probably. You go to bed, you make a meal, you open and close your door, you drive somewhere. And whatever those 4 things are, also start to add in the self-compassion, right? So while you're brushing your teeth, instead of thinking of your endless to-do list or beating yourself up about something, see if you can instead, in your mind, repeat those kind phrases like I'm perfectly imperfect, or I'm loved, or I'm worthy, I'm healthy. And then also check in and see how you're doing, right? What are those thoughts you were saying? How are these making you feel? And then being your best teacher, what can you do for yourself in this moment? And other times to be mindful is obviously like during transitions. And then for your kids, the night prior to a test, they're probably feeling a little overwhelmed. That's a good time to practice some self-compassion and even just some mindfulness, or a performance or a big event. Family trips can be stressful sometimes, right? So that could be another good time to do it, or after any stressful event, or even just daily. And so that's all that I have today. Thank you so much, Charlene. If you want to jump on now.
Well, thank you, Madeleine. That was really beautiful and a wonderful reminder to be compassionate, not just for our kids or our partners or our friends, but for ourselves. It's a really great message, and we could tell in the chat that people were really resonating with that idea. All right, so Madeleine, we have some questions for you that have come in earlier, so let's give it a try. Here's one of my favorite ones. How can you get a teenager interested in mindfulness? That's okay for you, Mom, my daughter says, but not for me.
I think the best way is through probably like what I've been talking to you tonight about, modeling, you know, them seeing you doing it and then them seeing how you feel better. I remember when I was in high school, my dad every day would go for a run after work. He would come home from work, look pretty stressed, go out for a run, come back and feel a lot more at peace. And that inspired me to do it eventually. He wasn't telling me, go come for a run with me, you're going to feel better. I just saw through example. And so I think that's a really great way to do it. Also, maybe integrate it into times that you're all together. Maybe just practicing moments of gratitude while you're eating a meal together. Or you could inspire them if they're into sports, mentioning like certain sport teams that practice it or that do mindfulness. I know Kobe Bryant does. I just recently showed a video to another group of people to inspire them. Like, look who's doing these practices. Or maybe even just to, create a space in your home that makes them feel comfortable, that they can go to kind of have a practice and, teach them a variety of practices, kind of like what we did tonight, kind of like a buffet of different things and see what they like.
Thank you. That makes sense. Madeleine, can you tell us a little bit more about your schools-based programs? What do the students that you work with find most useful in their busy lives?
Yeah, so our program for the high school has 12 lessons, and each lesson has a breath, a visualization. We do some self-reflection, we do activities, we do group sharing, we do a lot of different things. And I found that they really do enjoy the empathy lesson. I find that it's really helpful for them because they have a time where they each come together and they get to go a little bit deeper and not just see each other as classmates. They get to share things about one thing that the students don't know about each other, or one thing that's one experience that's been really hard for them. And also the responding versus reacting lesson's really great too, because they get to share a time that they've reacted, maybe at a sports game or to a friend, and we get to talk about it and normalize it, and then find little practices to help them learn that they can take that pause and that they can respond.
So do you think, for example, it's a good thing to say to your children, I watched this video tonight with this pretty woman, and she suggested that self-compassion is a really good thing. How about we try that? What would you say at the dinner table to get kids interested in what you talked about tonight?
I would maybe instead of doing that, maybe having the parent be vulnerable about a mistake they recently made, and to say what they actually said to themselves instead, and how they process that they imagine their best friend saying something kind to themselves and bringing in that common humanity as well. Like, we all make mistakes, right? And again, modeling it there instead of being like, you should do this, kind of giving them that example, I think might be more helpful.
That makes sense. I sent out an email this week to a woman who's an admissions director at UC Santa Barbara, and her name is Kuka. And I sent an email that said, "Dear Cuckoo." Didn't feel very good about that. Sent another email that said, "Use me," with the correction, kind of the Alice in Wonderland thing. And that helped me feel better.
Yeah, that's good. We all make mistakes.
We all make mistakes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's a mom that asks, "My friend and I enjoy regular walks and hikes in nature. Is this considered a form of mindful meditation?"
I believe so. If they're really practicing like mindful listening with one another as well, like letting go of what they're going to say next and really just listening to what the friend has to say, even practicing empathy and compassion, putting themselves into their shoes. And then also, walking is a really good meditation, just connecting to nature, noticing your body walking, letting go of those thoughts in the future or the past, and just being present with exactly where you are.
Okay, here's a question that I bet you hear a lot with the students that you work with. Is mindfulness beneficial for children or teens who are anxious or depressed? And if so, how does it work?
Yeah, if they're anxious or they're depressed, it definitely works. There's research that shows that it does help lower levels of stress and anxiety. I think mindfulness, it gives us a greater sense of belonging, that common humanity part I spoke about again. And it also normalizes what we are experiencing in our feelings. And it reminds us that it's not permanent, right? That all these feelings and all these emotions come and they go. And I also believe that mindfulness-based practices go really well with therapy. So they could also go hand in hand if they need that extra support too.
Thank you. That makes sense. Here's a question for you parents. How can we encourage educators to build more mindful moments into the school day, like the beginning of the day, before a test, after lunch?
Yeah, I think that telling the educators probably the benefits of the practice of mindfulness during transitions or big events, and talking about our nervous system and how it'll help the students get more into that peaceful, the parasympathetic nervous system before a transition, right? Before that test or after lunch, and just normal telling the science behind it and how this actually works might be able to help them. And that you just can set a timer for a few minutes and tell the students to just focus on their breaths and just relax their body a little bit, right? So.
Well, I know that some of your biggest fans are mental health professionals at high schools in the Sequoia Union High School District. That at Sequoia High School and Woodside High School and Menlo Atherton, your programs are very popular with students. Anything else you'd like to share with parents about why those programs are so popular?
Why they are so popular? I think because the mindfulness actually works. I think that especially now, there's so many distractions and there's so much technology and the pandemic and stress and anxiety, all these things are happening. And this practice is so simple and so available for all humans, that I think that that's why it's so popular, because it actually works and it doesn't take a lot to do it. You don't need a lot of things for it either.
Exactly. Well said. So here's a parent who has active twin boys, and he's asking, could mindfulness help my active twins focus? Their energy's off the charts, and when they get home from school, they're just bouncing off the walls. They don't get enough physical activity during the school day.
And so mindfulness will definitely help, but I feel that they should first do something more active. Like they could do something active mindfully. Like we do a lot of journaling and reflecting, but if they need to actually like release some energy, yoga, finding that flow state, Tai Chi, Qigong, you can even do running mindfully, right? You notice that you're actually running, you're being present with it, or walking meditation. And then after they get that energy out, also inviting them to see if they can sit in stillness and maybe count the breath, something that's a little more stimulating for them, that allows them to focus a little bit more, could be helpful.
That's a great point, Madeleine. I know a therapist, and he worked with a lot of boys, and they would take out each of them a basketball and walk and bounce the basketball and listen to the sound it made.
Oh, I love that.
And the boys really liked that.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, I thought that was fun. All right. Again, very similar question. My teenager has just been diagnosed with anxiety. Would you recommend some form of mindfulness to her? It sounds like you definitely would.
Yeah. I think that some people, I don't know the level of anxiety that that person has, but some people focusing on the breath can be too intense, sometimes for people with anxiety. And so I always suggest focusing on the sensation in your hands and your feet. We have a lot of sensation there. And so just noticing, having them get really stoned, like, do you feel the warmthness in your hands? Do you feel any tingliness? And just having them get out of their mind, out of that anxious thinking, that future thinking, and into their body. Or also, a lot of times when we are anxious, we're shallow breathing, right? We're in our chest. And so maybe having them take their hand to their lower belly, below their belly button, and having them feel their breath down into their belly, kind of like a balloon filling up with air as you inhale, and then slowly moving in.
Okay, well, thank you, Madeleine Pisey from Mission B, Corinne Winter from Mission B, for this wonderful presentation today. Again, everybody, thank you so much for coming. This video will be available in a few days on our video library. We work with the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula to do the video production. So be sure to share it with your kids and with your partners. I know we had a few students on today, so thank you everybody for joining us. And a really special thank you to Madeleine Pisey for today's presentation. Thank you, everybody. We're going to say goodnight for now. Panelists, if you could stay on for a really quick debrief. Everybody else, we're going to say goodnight. Hope you have a good weekend and rest of your week. Thank you and take care. Stay well.